So welcome to today. What I don't want to do is talk at you, and I don't want to pitch our talk at a level that's not appropriate. So at any time, do interrupt me. So come off mute and ask a question or stop me, because as a teacher, one thing I learned very early on was always to teach at the level that the children are at, and then take them one stage further. I don't know if you're like me, but I've sat in front of real gurus of all sorts of things, and they've been marvelous, I'm sure, but I haven't understood a word they've said because I'm not up to their understanding level. So I know some of you listening to me do it all and do it better than I ever did. So forgive me if I say things that you already know. One thing I often say on talks is that I always aim to really remind you about perhaps what you've forgotten. Someone once said that to me, Neil, you haven't taught me anything new, but you've reminded me about what's really important in education. And that's what I hope to do today. In reminding you, I remind myself too. So I prepared a presentation, which I will begin to share now, but I will come back to our group in a little while so you can comment and ask questions and give your own views, because I'm interested in this workshop to learn from you too. So let's see if this works. I always keep my fingers crossed. Nigel, can you see that? Okay, Nigel?
Perfect.
Right. So that's VbE International. We are truly international. If you need to contact us, go through our website, as you see it marked on there. There are 3 websites that are to do with values-based education. The first is valuesbasededucation.com. The second is the IVIT Foundation, ivitfoundation.com, and the third is the one that's named neilhawks.org. But they're all interlinked. Nigel keeps an eye on all 3, so they are similar messages, but a lot of the personal things I do go on to neilhawks.org. Now, that was a school I was in, it doesn't seem very long ago, although it's probably a year ago. It was in the United Kingdom. And I took that picture at the end of the afternoon because they were so enthusiastic. They were so up for it, as I would say. They were, someone was talking this morning about different types of people, you know, the pilots and the people, the protesters. But in this group of people, they all seem to be very much positive people. It was a values-based school, so I think the staff had done so much. But as you heard me say this morning, the key to a values-based school is relationships. Without relationships, you cannot build up trust. And trust is, I think, the key value. When I talk to other organizations, not schools necessarily, I'm always asking them about the level of trust. And the trust is built up through values. A values-based school never, ever, ever has a hierarchy of relationships, only a hierarchy of roles. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, do you ever go to schools where near to the front door of the school is a place that's marked head teacher or principal, and everybody else has to park miles away from the school? Well, that's a hierarchy of relationships. You know, we all should be equal. I know when I often say that, head teachers sort of get very, very cross with me. But in other ways, in school photographs, so often if you walk into a school foyer, you will see photographs. And I look at the photographs and I ask, is there a hierarchy here? Is the principal at the top? and the person who cleans the school at the bottom of the list of photographs. And if they are, I say, come on now, let's muddle them all up, label the person's name so everyone knows what role, but no one is better than anybody else. That's equity. And if you have equity, you have an open group. If you don't have that, in my experience, what happens is that there's the explicit values about the school. Those are the ones that are the laminated values on the wall. But there are implicit values. Those are the values that really happen in the school. Everybody knows that one member of staff is not very pleasant to everybody else, but it's all covered up. People cannot be honest and open in their relationships. So when you're forming a values-based school, it really can be a bit, difficult because you have to really be honest. My wife, Jane, gave me a wonderful expression years ago that came from transactional analysis, a psychological program. It is open, honest communication. So that in a values-based school, we have open, everybody is willing to share what they feel, honest, saying your truth without causing offense, and good communication. If you have those ingredients in your school, then you can share difficult things because we don't all agree. You know, I might have one idea, you might have another, but we share them and we respect the person who's giving the message. We don't say, well, I don't agree with that, that's rubbish or something, and then walk out the room. We say that I'm curious about why you might be saying what you do. So you're bringing the value of humility. And I often say to school leaders, you need a whole heap of humility. The job of a leader, in my view, is to release the creative dynamic of everybody who's a member of the staff. So everybody feels that their voice is heard. We often hear about the importance of the pupil voice, but the staff voice. So no one has to think because they're a newly qualified teacher or they are a part of the support team that they are less important than anybody else. So that's crucial when you're forming a values-based school or company or even family at home. You know, are your relationships at home open, honest, and all those things that I've talked about? Because if you are, then you might have some difficult moments. Jane, my wife, is sitting next to me at the moment because her seminar is coming up in a moment. And we often have quite sharp exchanges. But at the end of the time, we're always knowing that we love each other underneath and respect each other so that we can have that communication again. So getting on doesn't mean we agree all the time, because in a school, you want to have good ideas that are creative, and sometimes you need a little bit of tension. But always remember, if there's any feeling that you have about another colleague that's not positive, then find a time to make that up. Be the one to say, I'm very sorry, I spoke sharply, or I didn't quite understand what you were saying, so that you can repair relationships. The reason this is so important is how you are as adults in the school. The children immediately know. The children know how you are together. They notice as you're talking to one another as adults, how you are, whether there's tension. And they need to be in an atmosphere where there are good relationships. That isn't easy. Life is about forming and reforming relationships almost constantly. You think you've made it with somebody and then you think, oh no, I've got to do a little extra work there. Because being a human being, I don't know if it's your experience, but mine is, it's a complex business because understanding yourself is difficult enough without trying to understand someone else. So if you can be that sort of staff, absolutely great. Now, a little activity for you. I hope you have access to a piece of paper I've got a plate that you're seeing, but I'm going to just give you half a minute or so. And what I would like you to do, would you draw a circle that looks like a plate? And on your plate, would you write no more than 5 words which you believe are your core values? What are your values? May I give you just a minute to write those down? When you've finished, if you look up, then I'll know you're about ready. Those of you who aren't on video, then I'll make an assumption. So on the plate, I deliberately show a plate because I often say that's what you bring to the dinner table. That's what you bring to your own family. When you come and sit down with them to eat, or if you're at a school, when you come down to eat, those are the values that you're bringing to the dinner party. Would anybody like to share what values you put down? David.
Hi, everybody. Kindness, integrity, humility, love, fairness, gratitude, and beauty.
Wow, that's an incredible list, David. I'm interested to know, if I pinned you down and said, out of all that wonderful list, is there one that drives your behavior more than any others? Which would it be?
Kindness.
Yeah, Jane's just said to me, she's sitting, she said, yes, because we've met you. The day we visited your school, you just oozed kindness. So thank you for that. Would someone else like to share? You're like a class of children. They always look down when the teacher asks the question. Someone put up their hand. Who was it? Avilat.
Yeah, hi. To give it a momentum ago, well, my values were doing the right thing. I don't know how to call it, but doing the right thing. And then honesty, and then trust, and then care and respect. Yeah,
that's an incredible list. Where did your values come from? You're originally from Russia. So where did those values come from?
I think it's my education, my upbringing, my family, and my values, beliefs, things that I believe in.
Yeah, yeah. And which is your core value?
Well, the first one, doing the right thing.
Yeah, yes. I feel that very strongly from you. Nigel.
Thank you. I was just going to say that George, his microphone's not working, so he's typed in the list. And what he's typed is respect, understanding, cooperation, friendship, and kindness.
And George, which would be your top one?
George, if you want to type in your core value in the list, I can read that out as well. Respect, he thinks.
Respect. Yeah, that's a wonderful key value, I think. Let's just have one more. One more. Who would like to be? Manula.
Hello. I've put generosity, kindness, love, forgiveness, and service.
An incredible list there. And your key one for you, your core one?
Is love.
Love.
Yeah.
Why is that so important to you?
I think that's the most important one, because without that, the others, I think that's the main one, because the others stem from that. Because you've got to love what you do, and you've got to love other people for them to want to be kind to them, and to want to be, you know, forgiving, and to want to serve others as well. So all those other values stem from love, I believe.
Do you know, that's so interesting you say that. I was visiting, well, Julie Reese's school, Ledbury School, some years ago, and she was doing with the children, year 6 children, a similar exercise that we're doing at the moment. And they had to put an arrangement of values down on the ground, and a girl had put love at the top of her list. And I asked her, why do you put love? And she said, well, unless you have love, how can you have any of the others? And I thought that was a magic moment from a year 6 child, you know, great insight, really. So thank you for sharing your core values. Now, if I didn't have you in front of me, but I had the person who knows you the best, would they say the same core value about you, I wonder? Would they think that you model the values that you just said? Nod if they would. Some of you are thinking, oh, well, I'm not sure, not sure what they were saying. Can I invite you to ask that person or people, you know, ask them what values they see in you, and see, and you might be quite surprised what they say. The reason I'm saying this is we all go around thinking that we emanate certain values, but other people may not see that in us. So we need to check out. And a part of the process in school that I led many years ago was actually sharing with each other how we saw each other in terms of values. We might think we're kind, we might think we're all sorts of things, but how does someone else see us? And the more you know about how other people see you, the more that you can then be curious about yourself. I once remember a teacher many years ago who was very, very stern. And I used to think, oh my gosh, you're so stern with the children. And later on, she had a child of her own, and she became much more friendly. And I suddenly realized that she had an impression of herself, which was friendly, but she was nervous and she was slightly shy. And because she was that, she came over as stern. And so often there's something underlying. Jane and I were talking about anger the other day, and Jane, who often has great insights, said that, well, often people will be angry when they are fearful. So the underlying negative or limiting emotion is anger, is fear. But we show ourselves to be angry because we're worried or something. And I thought Jane's insight was really good. So you see how you are sort of being curious about values, about yourself. Because as I said in the presentation this morning, we have to be the change we want to see in the world. So many people say, well, if the government would change, things would be better. You know, if Donald Trump went away, things would be better, or whatever. But the truth is that we have to be the ones to change. And always remember the political climate. Politicians are a manifestation of the internal world of the population. So if we become stronger internally ourselves, then you will find society changes as well. It sort of upgrades itself. Society goes upwards rather than dumbing down. So think about the values. And when you have in a values-based school, it's no point in just having these words. The next stage is even more crucial. It's saying, well, which one of you said respect was your key? Was it George? Yeah, George, you said respect. So what I'd be asking each one of you to do with your core value is, how in reality do you show that core value? What does it really look like when you're loving or doing the right thing or love or whatever you might have said? What does it look like in practice? And that's what you get the whole staff to think about. You know, if you choose respect, then in a school, what do you stop doing as colleagues? What do you stop doing that you might be doing at the moment? And what do you begin doing that you haven't done? I think I said this morning, you know, you stop shouting at each other and at children. You don't do put downs and sarcasm. You don't have things like in primary education that I see in some classrooms called the cloud. You know, it's a cloud that's put on the wall, and children that are deemed to be misbehaving, their names are put on the cloud. Little children find that really disempowering and shaming to have that happen to them. So you think about your routines and structures and how you have to adjust. Professor Mick Waters talked about the environment of the school this morning. You really investigate your environment. You look at it. How is the environment really creating our value-based way of working? At West Kidlington School, we paid a lot of attention to our grounds outside the school. We developed a nature trail. We wanted to give the children experience of nature and the reality, because I believe that small children need to be in touch, as we all do, with the natural environment. That's why I started today with a rainbow. And please, another thing I'll ask you to do, before you go to bed tonight, just notice what's happening in the natural world. Be aware of how you feel, how cold it is or warm, the effect of wind on your skin, the plants on the ground or the dusty street or whatever you might see, and just connect with that. This is all about the environment. And really, Bridget, you talked this morning so eloquently about the spiritual side. And what we're doing through values-based education is emboldening the natural spirit of the human being. We are enabling that spirit to really show itself in the world and connect with each other in that sort of beautiful way. So, words, but make them into what is happening. And that's where challenge comes in a staff room. Because you might have someone, I ran a workshop some years ago in a secondary school, and they wanted to have respect. And I then said, well, what are you going to stop? And someone said, well, we must stop shouting at the children. And someone said, well, I've been shouting at them for the last 25 years, and it doesn't do any harm to let them know and put them in their place. And so, well, immediately you had a bit of tension on the staff, and people said, well, that's not right. That's, well, what's wrong with it? Now, it's really difficult to argue with someone that's spaced 25 years of their experience on doing something like that. So sometimes, I'm sad to say this, sometimes we have to part company with a member of staff that continues to think in that way. An old teacher once told me many years ago, and you've all heard this, children only get one chance. So why should we spoil that chance? So they deserve the very best we can give them. I'm going to go back to the screen share now. Hopefully it will happen.
Yep, you're there.
Thank you, Nigel. So, next, school of your dreams. Sometimes when I'm daydreaming, I think of the school of my dreams. I often go back to the school I used to run. Now, that's an English Victorian school. Your schools probably don't look anything like that. So don't worry, just pop a school there that you want to see. And when you're thinking, so you've thought about your values, and then you have to think, well, what about the adults? This is what I learned most of all, and that's why I did the little exercise we've just done, is that you think about the adults first. What sort of adults are we going to have in our school of the dreams? What sort of dispositions will they have? What sort of people are they going to be? That really needs to be thought through. If you're the leader of a school or a trust or a governing body and you're appointing people, then that really needs to be thought through, that you have a range of people with a range of experiences, a range of personalities. But you always ask at interview, what are your values? And you dig a bit deeper, finding out what sort of people these are, because they're going to be forming the children of the future, the adults of the future. So adults are so important to think about in the school of your dreams. This little exercise, by the way, you could do with your own staff at some point. Get them to think about the school of their dreams. This could take an hour to do this little process I'm showing now, but it's well worthwhile. Often schools become values-based schools almost too quickly. They make assumptions and they don't let every voice be heard, and everybody needs to be heard in this process. So what are the adults doing? Then, of course, the children. What are the needs of children? What are their needs? Jason talked this morning about the food needs of children, that children need exercise. One of my fears at the moment in many schools that I visit is that children don't have enough exercise. Jason said that many of our children are obese, but we seem to think that literacy and numeracy and a bit of science and other things are more important than keeping fit. Do you teach your children how to breathe? My wife, Jane, and Bridget will be talking about that, I think, in a later session this afternoon. But breathing. Jane has taught me really to use all parts of my lungs so that I know how to breathe. Do you teach the children how to sit with straight backs? Or do they slump forward and start to get round-shouldered, putting pressure on their lungs? So some very basic things. When I visit Thailand, children naturally sit properly. They've been taught to sit. But in the West, we allow children to gradually sink. So just these basic things. Then you have to ask, how do children best learn? Children best learn through experience, not by someone talking at them. In recent years in the United Kingdom, we've gone back to giving lots of knowledge lessons to children and standing at the front and lecturing them and then testing them on things. We know that that's not the way the brain works and absorbs information for the long term. Children learn best through first-hand experiences, actually seeing a rainbow, seeing snowflakes, asking you why you feel in that way, exploring their natural environment and the built environment that's near to the school. So lots of questions about children in the school of your dreams. How do you want those children to grow up? What sort of people, what sort of dispositions do you want them to have? The culture of your school would be next, or your classroom if you're a class teacher. What is the culture? Culture means how we do it round here. That's what culture is. And different cultures have, every school has a different culture because the adults in the school create the culture of the school. I've just been so amused at times when I've gone around schools. In the United Kingdom, there's various schools, and you go into one school and the principal, head teacher will have headmaster on his door. Another will have head teacher. Another will have headmistress or something. And I'm always curious. I say, why do you title yourself in that way? What's the reason you use that title for yourself? And it's all to do with culture. So just ask those sort of curious questions. How do children line up at playtime, if they line up at all? At assemblies, how do they stand? Where do they stand? Why do you do it in the way you do? So all these routines and structures, you question. What is the culture that's a values-based culture? What you're trying to do with the children in a values-based culture is give agency. You're putting the children in charge of their own behavior. Old-fashioned schools take control of children's behavior. 21st century schools invite the children to be in control of themselves. And you give them those skills, you teach them those skills. And then you have different relationships in the school. Lastly, the curriculum, which Bridget and others are working on anew for us. But you have the values curriculum, the explicit things you're talking about, the values, and then you have the wider curriculum. You know, where do values feature? In the science, for instance, or in mathematics, or in PE, physical education. So in the school of your dreams, when you're thinking about your values, you think of all these things. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and give you a chance to just have a chat yourselves about, is there anything I said that resonates with you, or you want to talk about, or you want to question, or anyone talk about their own school and their own experience and the challenges they have or the opportunities? I'll just give a few minutes for us to have a joint discussion. Charlotte, can I pick on you first? Because you made the incredible changes in such a challenging circumstance. What really made it successful for you? Because I know you're really successful.
Well, I still feel like we're very much on a journey, Neil, and we've got lots of things right. But as you're talking, that's why I chose to come to this chat, because I know you'll always pull me back and remind me of the things I've forgotten and draw me back to the sort of core principles, because you do sort of go off at tangents. So that's why I wanted to just look back at the fundamentals again. What interested me about what you said was I am known as a head teacher, and I don't like that term. I'd happily be called Charlotte, but culturally, because I think respect is so much bigger than her name, isn't it? And yeah, so if you've got any suggestions what else I could be called, I'd love that.
I used to think I'd put a notice servant on my door because I thought that's what I was. I just went around being the servant. Someone told me when I first arrived, I was a senior officer in a local authority before returning to headship. And someone on my first day said, Neil, stop being the inspector. You need to roll up your sleeves and get out there. And that was the best advice I had on day one. Because from that moment on, I rolled up my sleeves and I did everybody's job, putting tables out or cleaning up in the boys' toilet. Sometimes I've done it all, and I think that's how you show that you are a values-based leader. You're not sitting in your office, you're getting out there doing things.
I think that's been brilliant in lockdown, Neil, because I have actually, had to clean toilets. We've worked on an absolute level playing field. And that's done the whole school community such a lot of good, because everybody's been caretakers, they've been cleaners, they've been this, they've been that. And actually, as a community, a values community, it's really pulled us together.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Someone else like to share?
Manjula, you were just mentioning earlier that your school is a pupil referral unit, and I know it's relatively early days, but you just started briefly talking about some of the values you've implemented. I just wondered what your thoughts were on what Neil's been saying, and whether you've got any experiences yourself of how this might manifest itself in your school.
Hello. Well, we're new to the values-based education. We do have a value of the term or half term that we base assemblies on, or we have done before lockdown. And now that things have changed and the way we run our schools, it's not such a happy and free place like it used to be, and we want we feel that the students are missing out. A lot of them, because of the type of families they come from, haven't been out. They don't get to, during lockdown they were very limited to what we have. That's our job to do. We've implemented things this term, like Pupil of the Week. The children really love that. The pupils who receive that really love that. That's worked really well. And I think the idea of that Neil was saying about the explicit values and the implicit values, we do have lots of posters up around our centre with values and be kind and all those sorts of things. But but as a staff, we may not all behave or show those values to each other. So I think that's something for us to think about and take on board. We do, like all schools, there are differences between the staff, and there's little cliques and things like that. So I think that's something that we have to work through, as well as try and speak to the pupils about and try and help them with gaining some values. So
you are so right there. What I thought, when I go into values-based schools, I'm always looking, if they ask me to audit a school, I'm always looking for consistency from members of staff. So I'll often go and just be in a staff room and just listen out. You'll be like a fly on the wall. Because if you have lots of cliques on the staff, it does have a negative energy. It's a draining energy in the school. So you have to face that one up. There was a head teacher I knew many years ago who actually put a teacher on the disciplinary procedure because the lady was making rude comments about another member of staff. And because they were a values-based school, he said, well, we can't do this here. We don't behave in that way. If you have a disagreement with someone, then it's open and honest, and in the way that I described. So it is challenging, though, as you will find, sort of really calling people out when they are gossiping inappropriately about people. So thank you for that. Rosa, you've been very quiet this afternoon. Would you like to say anything? I'm not forcing you. You might have something to contribute.
Thank you for being here, for inviting me. Sorry. I think that when I saw the School of Your Dreams, it reminded me the values of indigenous people in Brazil, because I have, besides working with India and Brazil, with students from both countries in this virtual exchange, I have started developing some projects with some interactions with indigenous people. And I asked them about what is the school of your dreams? And the answer was just the most beautiful I have heard. They said that it is finding the origin of humanity, that education was finding the origin of humanity and working for a common purpose, for common objectives. And I think that this is a movement that we have done in different ways in different countries, to find this, education, I think, is the way that we can build this prosperity, peace, dialogue in all nations. So being the difference we want to be as a teacher, it means going sometimes against the system, or it means providing the system something that can really make the difference in each one's lives. So what I believe, like in Brazil, we don't have classes since March. And it means that we are having, some schools are having 5 hours a day of online classes. And it's very interesting because the virtual exchanges like we are having here, they have created wonderful dynamics to interact and to have students feel safe and to trust in the process. And I have learned a lot. I feel I am a learner, and the value behind it is really connecting humanity, being human.
I think that's one of the takeaway messages for today. I'm noticing that everyone is nodding. You know, Jane has written down your phrase. I think it was a beautiful thing to say. I'm so pleased I called on you. My intuition was to ask you that. So I'm just going to reshare my screen. Yeah, I think it's just going to take us through the school of our dreams again. Ah, yes. I do like this picture. I had permission to show this picture. So yeah, this is just emphasizing culture of a school. This was a school that hadn't started its values journey, and the head teacher had just begun through a member of staff who was interested in VbE, and he invited me into the school. And this was an assembly on a Monday morning, and the assembly, the section of the assembly you are seeing is when a music teacher had just put on some jazz music. And the children were very, you can't see it because it's a static photograph, but if you can feel the atmosphere in that hall, it was literally electric. If I tell you this was a school with very challenging behavior from the children, the staff, what do you gather from the staff when you look at them? They're looking very fearful. If someone puts their finger to their lips and starts biting their nails, you know that they're a bit worried about what's going to happen. And the question there was, what do you think the man does next? Now, as we're a bit pushed for time, I'll tell you. What he's doing is eyeballing a child at the end of a row, and he then goes along the row, picks up the child and brings the child to the side of the room and tells the child not to move. Those teachers were full of fear. They knew that because that music teacher had wound the children up, that the rest of their Monday morning was going to be difficult. So we brought in values-based education to that school. And when I showed that picture to the staff a year later, they all burst out laughing. They couldn't believe that that was them a year ago, because they employed all the things that we talk about in values-based education, and the relationships changed and the children's behavior changed. Those children are all capable of behaving well. You might have the odd child who has a particular special need that finds it difficult, but the majority of children can behave if you model it first. And that's what the teachers did. They started modeling the behavior they wanted to see of the children. So what you're doing in your school is creating a safe environment. Number one, relationships, but the relationships then lead on to a safe environment. It's key. That's why as a head teacher, you have to really audit your school. on a weekly basis. I used to walk around with our site foreman on a Monday after assembly each week to make sure our environment was safe. We looked everywhere. We looked on the school grounds because our school grounds could be invaded at the weekends by the local community, and all sorts of things could be left on our school grounds without going into detail. And so a safe environment, both physically, emotionally, is so, so important. Very quickly then, before we wrap up, I find this a really useful little diagram to sum up. I hope you do too. This is a wonderful head teacher in London, in Enfield, called Pat Wood. Pat leads an incredibly wonderful values-based school. And she's an incredible leader. She models the school's values. She really does model them. Some of us who are watching have been to her school, and she is wonderful. You'll notice behind her, in the window of her study, is a value, the word trust, which is the value that they were concentrating on for that particular period of time. Now, what we're saying today is that the beginning of the values journey is your own personal values. You have to, either as a class teacher or as the head teacher principal, you have to really drill down and ask some really tough questions of yourself. And if you have someone like my Jane, you ask her too. She's sitting beside me. You say, well, what am I? You know, am I being authentic to my real core values? If not, what do I need to change? How can I encourage myself? Because we've all had experiences in life, and those experiences lead us to behave, aspects of us, to behave in certain ways. And sometimes we need to soothe those aspects of us. So the personal values you need to think about, and there's that picture of her values. Then, as I've said in this little workshop, we then think about our behaviors, our personal behaviors. How are they linked together? Do they flow naturally? Or what we think are our values, are they really? Are there some implicit values that sneak out of the box occasionally and catch us out? You know, when we're feeling a bit emotional, do we suddenly bite back at someone and say something rude? Or, you know, what is it that comes out of us when we're under pressure, for instance? And I have to hold my hand up. I've been caught out for that myself. Then when you're running, so you have to make sure there's alignment between those two things. And that's not a quick process. And it's something we have to do regularly, Charlotte, I think, as you're doing today, revisiting the values today. It's something that we have to continue because we're all growing and changing. Then we have to think of the staff. And you do the values work with the staff. What's their school of dreams? What are their values? What do they think is important in terms of how children learn? Are they all on the same page in all those things? And they have to think about their values as a group of people as well as individuals. So you have those group values of staff. Then the leadership of the school has to make sure that the leader, that person's, or it could be the senior leadership team, their values are in alignment with the rest of the staff. And I mean the whole staff, teaching and non-teaching. Remember that your school secretary or the person who answers the phone can be a real psychological leader in the school. So don't always think that the head teacher is the most powerful leader in the school. In my experience, there are often others who are equally or more powerful. So that group of teachers have to think about their behaviors. How are they going to treat children, each other? Are they going to have times? Someone spoke this morning about having a time when they all had, Julie was saying on a Sunday night, they all meet over a glass of wine or something virtually. You know, what do you do? In New Zealand, when Jane and I were there at the beginning of the year, yes, we were there just before lockdown, one of our daughters and her department went to the beach for a beach party after school. So all these ways of making sure the group behavior, is in alignment with the values. So all those things join up, the personal behaviors and the group behaviors, and you get purpose alignment. And that all ends up with this wonderful word harmony, because at the end of the day, you are having harmony. If you know how to do it, you could do a screen save now on your computer if you wanted to have a picture, a screenshot of that.
Neil, I'm going to have to step in now. We're taping this, so people will be able to get a screenshot from the recording.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to wrap this up now. Did you want just the last word or two?
Yes, last word is that there are lots of books on the subject. That's a book that I wrote some years ago. That's the school that I'm very fond about. That was our sculpture. I do invite you to have a sculpture or something at your school that represents the school's values. That one is a symbol, which means that the children's values will hold up the world of the future. Again, the messages you send to the future. I wish, my only regret this afternoon is that we don't have another couple of hours or so together. But I hope I intended to revisit some real basic points today in values formation. So I hope you found that useful. The main message is please hold up the mirror to yourself, but do it in a compassionate and loving way. Thank you, Nigel.